Hello Internet, and welcome back to Cinema Brawls, where I have graciously taken a break from promoting my autobiography, Up the Creek with Too Many Paddles, to bring you another list. So, you know how most people have some kind of hobby? Some people play sports, some people like to draw, some people like to initiate World War II in Europe by invading Poland, some people play instruments. Well, recently I've gotten into the hobby of making lists. I like taking topics I enjoy and putting them in order of how much I enjoy them. I feel it provides a sense of identity, and it feels good to be able to give someone a straight answer when they ask about my favorite or top something of anything. So you better believe I already had a top 10 list of my favorite movies done when we decided to make these videos, but when I went to go check it out, I realized that I disagreed with myself on almost all accounts. There were movies I just didn't think were top 10 material anymore, and the movies that stayed on the list weren't in the same order as before. Suffice it to say that I haven't rewritten this list 17 different times, but I have put a lot of thought into what I consider to be my top 10 favorite movies of all time. So, here it is. My name is Matt from Cinema Brawls, also known as the last remaining crank pencil sharpener attached to a wall in an elementary school classroom somewhere in the Midwest. And here is my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Well, more like a top 13. There are a few honorable mentions I want to talk about first, because these movies have been on my top 10 at different points and I feel deserve some time in this video. First, Airplane. Everybody has that one movie that defines their humor style and what they find funny in return, and this is mine. Okay, this movie is fantastic and is a masterclass on making your film rewatchable. Every scene has at least 3 different jokes going on in the background, beyond the actual lines being said in the foreground. I find new gags and jokes every time I rewatch it, and I love it every time. It's not an Oscar-worthy film or anything, but it's not trying to be. Go watch Airplane and bask in the dry, sarcastic, play-on-word humor that is done so well in this movie. Next honorable mention, Stardust. Very few movies have really grabbed my attention the first time I watch it and become an instant favorite, but Stardust is one of those movies, and I first saw it when I was 16. It's full of magic and adventure, it has good humor, good character moments, and it has a very deep atmosphere that goes down to the smallest detail. It's just so much fun and quirky, I just love it. I firmly believe this is the closest we have ever gotten to recreating the same style of humor and storytelling as The Princess Bride. Plus, it's a lot of fun to see Charlie Cox as an awkward young adult looking for love, rather than the blind crime-fighting daredevil he is now. My last honorable mention, Better Off Dead, which was actually at the bottom of my 35 entry long master list, but it deserves a quick mention because it has one of my favorite lines in all of cinema.
Gee, I'm real sorry your mom blew up, Ricky.
Alright, now let's get into the real list. Starting at number 10, I chose Toy Story. Pixar is one of the best movie studios out there, and it's all because of this movie. This movie was the springboard that launched Pixar into what it is today, to the point we spent an entire month talking about each of their films in depth. Toy Story is one of the first films I remember really liking as a kid, and I have it on good authority, my mom, that I would watch it almost every day when I was little. Toy Story is extremely creative from a story standpoint, and is a lot of fun to watch no matter how old you are. The animation ages surprisingly well and has given us great characters we can all relate to. At number 9, I put Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I love the storytelling aspect of all the Indiana Jones movies, but I really like it in The Last Crusade. I love watching them go through and solve the mystery, I love the clues, I love the good character interactions, especially between Indy and his father. We got great actor performances, some really high-stakes action scenes, and it's great. Number 8 is Back to the Future. In the very first episode on this channel, links in the description, we talk about what makes this movie so great, and I will reiterate them here. It is the seminal action-adventure movie and is the first movie I think of when I think of the genre as a whole. It has a great story with great characters, played by amazing actors, and has just such an interesting premise. There was so much thought and effort put into this film that they even built an entire city block for it. That's right, the town square with the clock tower isn't a real place. Robert Zemeckis did an incredible job and even kept the tone and intensity consistent with the sequel. You know what? I'm just going to go ahead and throw the sequel in here too, because they are that seamless together. I just love the uplifting score, the awkward teenager love story mixed with the edge of your seat finale. It is a really, really great film. My number 7 is Chronicle. This one is probably the oddest one of the whole bunch because I'm not sure how many of you have actually seen this film. Chronicle is a movie about a group of high school kids that stumble upon a meteorite crash that gives them telekinetic powers. Most of them just use their powers for general teenage mischief and stuff, but one of them snaps and goes on a murderous rampage so people would start noticing him. Sounds dope to me. I'm in. Where do I sign up? The best part about this is that it's a found footage film, as in all the camera work we see is meant to look as if it's shot in an in-story camera, like a cell phone or a security camera from a nearby building. But since they can move things with their minds, the camera can be in more dynamic places and angles and still make sense for the story. It is very intense and emotional and features a young Dane DeHaan and Michael B. Jordan. Number 6 is Baby Driver. This is also probably a less conventional one because it's a relatively new movie and again might not be very well known. Edgar Wright is an incredible director who is very meticulous with all of his work. Baby Driver is a classic heist story done exceptionally well through the use of its music. That's like the whole thing, is that Baby, the getaway driver, is constantly listening to music, so every gunshot, car crash, and sometimes even footstep is perfectly timed to whatever song happens to be playing. I guess every actor would have earpieces playing the music in unison so that they could time it out that way. That kind of craft and care from the director, actors, and everyone involved just speaks to how great this film is. That, and this was the movie my wife and I saw the day I proposed to her, so there's a little bit of sentimentality to it. Moving on to my number 5 pick. Number 5 has always been my obligatory MCU movie entry. I love the MCU and I love what they've done with these characters over the years, but it's difficult to say a single one that I like that stands out among the rest of the movies on this list, since the stories are all connected in some way. And since I can't just put a bunch of Marvel movies throughout the list because of made-up rules and criteria ultimately I came up with, I decided to go with Captain America: Civil War to represent all of the MCU. Civil War is probably my all-time favorite of the MCU movies. I love the gritty realism of the government cracking down on the Avengers and providing real-world consequences to their actions. I love the deep character interactions. I love the deep-seated plan Baron Zemo had to tear the Avengers apart and the fact that it worked. And of course I love all of those epic fight scenes. It's smaller scale and more digestible than the huge romps that are Infinity War and Endgame, but still big enough to almost be considered its own Avengers movie. My number 4 pick runs in a similar vein. I chose Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. Batman is a fantastic superhero, and no matter how many times they remake his story, either in film, TV, or video games, it is always good. But the things Christopher Nolan did to Gotham in his trilogy is by far the best so far. Once again, the gritty realism works incredibly well in this setting, and the action scenes are great. The character interactions are very well written, and, do I have to say anything other than Heath Ledger's Joker? And let's be honest, you're probably going to get more explanation for this film out of Jake and Daniel's top 10 lists. My number 3 pick, despite Daniel's best efforts to convince me otherwise, is The Princess Bride. Now, don't get me wrong, The Princess Bride is great, but I am nowhere as invested in it as Daniel is. To its credit, it's one of those movies that pretty much everyone likes. I would be surprised if it wasn't on everyone's personal top 10 lists in some capacity or another. Who doesn't love the satirical humor and witty banter back and forth? Who doesn't love the fun action scenes and memorable characters? Who doesn't love the ridiculous notions of six-fingered men and machines that suck away your life and swamps that breathe fire? It's just a great movie all around that you can enjoy at any point in your life for different reasons every time, and that's why it's so high on my list. However, it is only number 3. That's because my next 2 picks are, in my opinion, that much better. I'll be honest, these 2 movies often switch places. I'm torn between what I genuinely like and have liked for many years, and the movie I feel is a very well done and important film for me personally. They've honestly probably switched a handful of times since writing and recording this list, but I think I can confidently say this is the order it is most of the time. My number 2 pick, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Once again, there are just some movies that just define your humor and therefore who you are as a person. This is a very nostalgic movie for me. This is a movie my dad was particularly excited for when it was coming out, having read the book series and loving it. They had a website open leading up to the film's release that actually had the literal guide you could go through and check definitions for things, watch trailers for the film, etc. We would spend hours going through that and laughing all along. It's one of those movies I enjoy watching often and usually get around to it every couple of months. I love the dry British humor and the fast-paced dialogue. It takes a couple of rewatches to really understand everything they're trying to say. If I ever get lucky enough to have a film made about my life, I want Stephen Fry narrating it. It has great actors and a fun story. I have also since read all the books and found them appropriately awesome, and it's almost a perfect adaptation, might I add, which doesn't happen a lot. It was very hard not to have this as my number one, but I think the one I picked is very deserving of that spot. My number one favorite movie of all time is The Prestige. A few months ago, I put out a video going over all the reasons I feel The Prestige is a perfect movie, going through the way it's filmed and edited and the things it represents. And while it's one of my all-time favorite movies because of all of those reasons, it goes a little bit further for me. This would have to be the single movie that grabbed my attention and made me start really paying attention to film as a whole. It's thanks to this movie that I really got a good idea what it means to have a compelling story and how to tell it in a way that keeps the audience's attention the whole way through. I realized how important dialogue is, lighting, good camera angles, and of course the importance of good actor performances. One of the very first screenplays I wrote, or attempt at a screenplay, was a murder mystery story surrounding the real-life disappearance of Harry Houdini that I called Vanished. I wrote it because of how inspired I was from The Prestige. I loved it so much that I wanted to try and emulate the same things I liked in a creation of my own. It's thanks to this movie that I gained an interest in film in the first place and understood what makes a good one, and it's the reason I'm here today doing these videos on YouTube. The Prestige is my favorite movie of all time. If I had to sum up what I look for in a movie and what I think makes a movie good, it's a compelling story. I love it when a film has a unique premise and the plot unrolls with complexity and fun. That's why I love films like Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, and the MCU, because they all have that. Likeable characters and emotional investment is important, but a story that inspires me to go on to write my own stories is what makes a good movie for me. So, that's my list. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you comment below your favorite movies. Thanks as always for liking, subscribing, and sharing, and I'll catch you guys next time.